Hey folks, Amanda here. Just a quick heads up that from time to time, the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast does include some adult language. So if you've got kids with you, you may just want to hold on to this episode to listen to a little later. Enjoy! Welcome back to the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast, the show for people who are ready to break out of survival mode in order to build a truly thriving life. I'm Amanda Solman, and along with Mark Jewell and the rest of my team here at Mark Jewell Speaking and Training, we break down common roadblocks that keep people stuck surviving and share ideas to help you thrive each and every day. We're joined back on this week's episode of the podcast with my fellow MJST teammate, Wade Johannes. Wade, welcome back.
Hey, Amanda. Good to be back with you.
Always good to have you on the show. And today we have another great topic to dig into. And we're going to kind of talk about where leadership and professional personal development, where those three things intersect. And so one thing that I think I've definitely noticed, and I think other members of our team has noticed, is that when professional development normally happens in an organization, we see that a lot of companies like to pick teams or individuals to maybe quote unquote pilot a new program with. So maybe they're sending people through a training like ours, maybe they're using a new assessment. But we see it all the time, right? Especially with our training and coaching programs. A company wants to try us out. And so maybe they send one or two salespeople through the program. Now, I don't want to take anything away from that because we love to work with people who want to grow themselves. And I don't care what their job title is, what their experience is. I don't care about any of that. But I think something we have noticed is that sometimes instead of sending maybe the quote unquote low man on the totem pole to training, that maybe leaders should be thinking about being the first ones to go through a development program. And so, Wade, I'd like you to just kind of fill us in and give us sort of your perspective. Knowing that things normally happen where we send kind of boots on the ground people to training first and then go up, why might companies want to think a little differently about how they do professional development and maybe consider starting at the top and then working their way through the organization from there?
Yeah, that's a great question, Amanda. So when you think about the last 3 years that I've been a part of MJST and all of the hundreds of coaching clients that I've had the opportunity to work with, we've learned a lot of different things from all these different organizations. And one of them is this exact topic that leaders should go first. I'm going to start us off just with an example. So I recently came back from South America and had some time in Colombia in the jungle. And one of the things that was just all around us were all of these just amazingly beautiful flowers and all of these different colors and shapes. And it was just amazing. Nothing like anything that we've seen, obviously, here in Nebraska. So when you think about one of these individual flowers, and if we were to, dig it up and bring it back with us, what would it be like if we were to bring it back and expose it to 20-degree temperatures and a foot of snow? What's going to happen to that flower?
Nothing good.
Yeah, it's going to end badly, right? And that's a very extreme example, but I think it makes the point. If we send off a salesperson or a team member and they have a great experience, but then they come back and it's the same culture, what's going to happen to those new behaviors? They're going to go away just as quickly. And so that's one of the biggest reasons why traditional training has been such a low return on investment. Some say less than 1-to-1, because you have to address the culture, and the culture starts at the top.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to kind of expand on, I really like that analogy. I think it illustrates the picture so well. That if the environment isn't right for personal growth, professional growth, and development, that investment you're making in that person, and not that it won't yield value, I think it will. Like, we'll never tell you that somebody comes to our program and doesn't take some value away. But I think what you're saying is, how much more value could that person or that team bring if they're stepping into an environment that continues to facilitate that growth, continues to foster that evolution. And if we don't have the support of supervisors, of especially senior leaders who are really embracing that growth, you just might not be getting as much return as you could. And so one way that I know you've talked about is that when it comes to culture, or when it comes really to any change in an organization, that leadership can be a limiting factor on how that change happens, how that cultural shift takes root. And so kind of talk to me a little bit more about that and the role that leaders play in kind of setting the tone.
Yeah, so we just talked about how culture starts at the top. And Mark Jewell actually told me this a little over a year ago, and he admitted to me, he's like, Wade, this hurts for me to say, but the limiting factor in any organization is its leader, or is its leadership. And that's one thing that we've uncovered here in the last couple of years, is when the leaders go first, it's like the lid is lifted off of the organization, and all of a sudden this unrealized potential starts to come out. But it starts with, the leader leveling up, showing up differently, and having the attitude that, hey, I am bought in on this process, come join me. And that is a key distinction in terms of the effectiveness in working with MJST.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that there's so much truth there. We've worked with people in the past who their boss or their boss's boss was who kind of stepped into a development opportunity before them, whether it was with us or someone else, right? Because I think this applies no matter what the effort, the change effort is within an organization. And especially if they respect that person in leadership, the folks kind of on the ground, they may not be fully bought into the change or the effort being put in place, but if they see their boss or their boss's boss really bought in and really passionate about it, you start to go, well, maybe it isn't so bad, right? Maybe he or she, maybe they know something I don't, and so I'm willing to give it a try just to see what happens. That idea that leadership, whether they know it or not, sets a standard by the example that they illustrate. I think that is, you might not realize it all the time, but how you show up and the actions you take send a message. Would you agree?
Yeah, without a doubt. So one of the questions that we ask in coaching is for people to take time and reflect on, what behaviors am I modeling? And if somebody is being honest with themselves, they can identify opportunities to improve in small ways. We've all been around people who say one thing and do another. And that inauthentic leadership, as commonplace as it unfortunately is, whether people articulate it or not, that's a big reason why engagement is so low in workforce. One statistic that I came across here a while back, they talked about core values, and pretty much every company has core values or mission, vision statement, all that on the website. Well, what % of these organizations actually spend time to train on who they are as an organization. And then it's part of the everyday language and they make decisions off of it. The statistic that I found is less than 10%. And I asked that question of a CEO this morning who said, I'm guessing 2%.
Yeah.
In other words, everything is a bunch of lip service because we're not stepping in and owning this is the standard, and I'm going to set the standard and I'm going to invite you to come join with me.
Yeah. And I think that's something, core values obviously covers a wide range of things, but I think something that I feel like really elite organizations and really elite leaders value, whether it's formal or informal, is a culture of growth, a culture of evolution, a culture of constantly striving to be better every day, right? Whether that's as an individual, as a team, as an organization. But that being said, I feel like sometimes leaders, when they invest in people down the line, but avoid investing in their own growth, maybe subconsciously, unconsciously send a message that, I've arrived, I'm successful, I've reached the destination, you're not there yet. And that's why you still have work to do or whatnot. And I don't always know that that's intentional, right? I also want to be fair because I think, everyone's busy. Everyone has a lot going on. Everyone's got responsibilities. And that doesn't matter whether you're, a salesperson who's been on the job 6 months or, a CEO who's been working for 30 years, right? Like that doesn't matter. But I think that as leaders, we have to be careful of the messages that we're not saying and yet we're still sending. And so if I say, to your point, right, Wade, like if I say growth evolution is important, and that our company should always be striving to be better than we were yesterday, and yet my employees don't see me investing in my growth, my evolution, my desire to be better than I was yesterday, I think sometimes that can create a challenge for folks because, again, you're saying one thing and doing another. Or when I send so-and-so through training or coaching, they're like, oh, why do I have to do it? My CEO's not doing it, or whatever it is. I don't know. What's your experience around that, or what's your thoughts?
So there's a great book written by Carol Dweck called Mindset. And her specialty is talking about the difference between having a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. So a fixed mindset at a high level is essentially, I'm born, this is my DNA, this is who I am, this is the definition of me and my potential. And a growth mindset is one that with enough time, with enough effort, I can learn or do anything. Now, some people might take a little bit longer, like myself, certain topics, science or medicine, that kind of thing. I could do it. It's going to take me 3 times as long as somebody else, but I absolutely could do it with enough time, with enough effort, if that's what I set out to do. But having the growth mindset that, you've never arrived, you've never made it. Titles do not define who you are. Carol Dweck, she talks about how becoming is better than being. And so there's always more out there. And for some, that might sound exhausting, that leveling up, there's no limit in where you can go in terms of the human potential. That sounds exhausting to some, but see it as a challenge because success is a process. It's not a destination.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like something you can't deny is that when leaders invest in themselves, so this goes even beyond like what are the unspoken messages you send, but I think when leaders invest in themselves, when they do focus on that idea of becoming, right, constantly becoming the next best version of themselves, when you're in a position of or when you are in a role of positional leadership, like people can't help but notice that. Whether hopefully you're changing for the good and evolving and growing for the good. I think the people around you see that and they start asking questions or they start wondering what you're doing. And so, or maybe they even see like, oh, I want to be like that, right? Maybe I have aspirations of leadership and I see how this leader is constantly evolving and growing themselves. Like, I think of some of the organizations we've worked with where the leader has gone first or close to first, and we hear all the time from their employees who do coaching with us, like, man, so and so was in the gym before he came in today for our executive team meeting, or man, so and so he or she is having date night with their spouse every week. I don't know how they fit it in amongst everything else, right? Like, those are obviously personal investments in oneself, but people can't help but notice when you start to set that example and they start to question, well, if you can do it with all of your responsibilities as a leader and all that you have going on, well, maybe if they can do it, I can do it too. And so I think that we have to remember as leaders that our actions do indeed speak louder than words. And we can use those actions for good to influence the people who work for us, not just when they're in the office, but even beyond that as well.
Yeah, it's about being an authentic leader. That's who people want to follow. And there's a great quote out there. It says, "Show me your habits and I will show you your future." And so when you think about what behaviors am I modeling for the people around me, whether it's your team at work, whether it's your family at home, whether it's people in the community, it makes a difference. It may not make a difference on day one, but over time, people will want to be more like that leader who is authentic. And this is who I am as a person, continually leveling up and getting better, working on myself.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've kind of talked around this a little bit. It's come up in some of the comments we've made so far. But maybe we can come back and summarize or maybe add a few additional thoughts. But of everything we've been talking about, what do you think? Let me back up. I think it's pretty clear that having leaders invest in themselves is important for a whole host of reasons. What do you think it is that keeps our leaders from investing that time, investing that energy into their own personal and professional growth?
So for one, and this can be an individual decision or this could be kind of a cultural decision, but an attitude of I've made it. And we've seen this in different cultures. And when that happens, watch out, because man, it is just a matter of time. If leaders are not doing the self-improvement and working on themselves, it's just a matter of time before that organization is gonna collapse. I mean, it's just a matter of time. It's inevitable. But having the other thing that I hear, and it's I'm putting words into other people's sentences here, but what I hear people say is, I am fine, my people need the help. And that a lot of what we do at MJST is about increasing self-awareness. And one of the easiest ways to level up in any leadership capacity is to increase your self-awareness and to realize what else is possible when you go to work on yourself first.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm fine. If my people need the help. Oh gosh, if you ever hear some variation of that come out of your mouth, or through your mind, that's another good watch out to catch. Because the reality is, every single one of us is in a constant state of expansion, and so we have the ability to grow for the good or grow for the bad. And I think when we deflect that and say, "Oh, it's not me, it's them," that's a watch out. Just to be careful of. One thing, Wade, I I guess maybe I've never heard this straight out of anybody's mouth. And so maybe I'm projecting. But one thing I think too, because as a leader, you get to make the decisions, right? You get to choose who does and doesn't get to go through training or coaching or a workshop or a whatever. Especially when leaders work with us, right? They love that we are, in coaching, we provide some tough love sometimes, right? They love that we're going to tell it how it is. We love that, or they love that, we're going to give the feedback that somebody may not want to hear, but probably needs to hear to help them become the best version of themselves. And I think sometimes some leaders are a little afraid of receiving that feedback for themselves, right? Like I was listening to a podcast recently. I can't remember if I've told you this, but this CEO was saying that they had a practice amongst their senior leadership team where, when they got together, maybe it was weekly or something for their team meeting, she would always ask them, what is feedback that I don't want to hear, but I need to hear? And that just struck me so much because I think sometimes when we're in senior leadership positions, we're actually probably some of the last people to get really good, constructive, valuable feedback because we're the boss, right? No one wants to tell us what we're doing wrong because, we have the power, we swing the gavel. And so maybe unless you answer to a board of directors or something like that, but I think so often as leaders, we're out of practice in receiving really good, well-intentioned feedback. Now, I think as leaders, we often hear about what's not going well, but I wouldn't necessarily say that's the kind of feedback I'm talking about. And so sometimes I think the idea of sending yourself through like an intense personal growth or professional development opportunity, it's easy to send somebody else because you're not the one on the receiving end of the tough love, but it might be a little scary for you. I don't know. Am I totally making that up?
No, not at all. The problem is that comfort is the enemy of all growth. And the number one challenge that we see in senior leaders in any organization in terms of their own professional development, the number one challenge they face is they, generally speaking, have a really nice life. They're comfortable. And, it doesn't matter if, senior leader, top of the organization, if you own an organization, you're able to afford the boat, the RV, the season tickets, whatever, you're able to do those things. And so, those kind of start to become distractions. And so it's just about that next weekend to go feel good and just kind of disconnect for a while because we've earned this. But when you really need feedback, and I love that piece of feedback that you mentioned here earlier, but what's one thing that I don't want to hear? And every time you talk with that person, you're supposed to bring up one more thing that you don't think that they're going to want to hear. Feedback is a gift. And if we don't ask for it, people may not feel comfortable sharing something with us for fear of what's going to happen to them. And so, there are major organizations that are no longer in existence because the CEO was surrounded by a bunch of sycophants. And at different levels, that can become the case. So encouraging people, okay, what is it that I need to know? And just continue to probe for that and ask and reward that, simply by recognizing people for speaking up for what is right instead of what is easy.
Absolutely.
The other thing that I want to just kind of add on, and this is, something that we see, when you are, let's say you're an agronomy manager, you're constantly getting asked by vendors to come do this, come do that, either whether it's for lunch or the game or this hunting trip, fishing trip, whatever it is, they're constantly being asked for their time. And when I think that's a big watch out when we're surrounding ourselves with people who are providing these things to make us comfortable that aren't telling us what we need to hear. A couple of our really good partners have told MJST, one reason why we love you guys is because you tell me what I need to hear rather than what I want to hear. Mm-hmm. And when I probed about that, they said, do you realize how many people just come and tell us how great we are all day? I don't need any more of that. I've got too much of that. What I need to know is where am I falling short and where am I not executing on what I said I was going to do?
Yeah. Yeah, that it's so powerful, right? And we all need those people in our lives. Obviously, we're talking about leaders here today, but none of us are going to grow into our potential when we're just surrounding ourselves with ego strokers and yes men or yes women, right? Like none of us are going to reach our potential when that's the case. And so I love those stories of hearing that, of actually appreciating sometimes hearing the tough stuff, because that's what's going to push us into the better version of ourselves. So I'm curious.
And you talk about accountability, like with the board of directors. Even if you are the CEO and that is who you report to, they're not there in the day to day. You may talk to them weekly or see them at the monthly meeting, but if you're not following through on what you say you're going to do, you need the people around you in the day to day operations to have the courage and to feel comfortable to call you out on that. And it's not about making you look bad or making you look less. It's about having a stronger team where we feel comfortable and safe to do what's right. And when we do that, when we create that environment where it's okay to challenge somebody, that's when we get the best result. That's when our customers get rewarded. That's when it goes all the way down to the front line.
Yep. Absolutely. And it comes from all angles, right? So one is building this internal culture of feedback and being the leader that creates the space where people can, admittedly over time, build up a comfort level with sharing that feedback. But it's also setting the standard that I go out and seek that type of feedback as well, not just from an internal team, but also from external partners. And so kind of on that second group or that second note, Wade, I'm curious, you have done quite a bit of coaching with some of the senior leaders, executive folks, C-suite folks that we work with. And I'm curious, what are some of the things you've noticed, or what are some of the things that you've heard from those leaders who have raised their hand and said, yep, I'm going to opt into this, even if it's going to be hard, I'm going to sign myself up. What's that been like?
Yeah, the number one piece of feedback that we get at all levels of organizations, but the ones that stand out the most are from CEOs and senior leaders, but they say, I realize now that I'm not on an island. I've got a safe place that I can come talk through different challenges that I'm facing, and I don't have to internalize this. You think of the value of that. That is right there is worth its weight in gold, just having an outlet. And it doesn't mean that, you come to Amanda or Mark or Wade and they give you the answer. No, we hold a space for you to figure out the answer yourself. And we'll ask you questions, we'll challenge you. And so you can figure out what is the best solution. And then we get to hold you accountable to follow through on what you commit to.
Yeah.
And as you continue to do that and continue to do that with multiple reps layered on top of each other, that's where confidence comes from. That's where breakthroughs come from. That's where individuals and organizations level up.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate too how important this is no matter the size and scale of your business. I think some leaders or business owners, they look at a big, Fortune 500 company, a CEO who's making bazillions of dollars and think, "Oh man, I shouldn't be as concerned or whatnot, or I don't have that much pressure on me." But this is from a totally different realm than the executives we work with. But I even know of a group in our area. I don't know that this is their technical name, but they're like a small business mastermind. And so it's a mastermind group of small business owners. So some of these people, like, they don't even necessarily have staff or like anything like that, but they're still responsible for their business, or they might only have, 1, 2, 3 employees, but they still have decisions that they're making for their business. And kind of to your same point, that feedback that, oh, I'm not the only one going through this, and to be able to have a space, and honestly, a lot of times signing yourself up for coaching or signing yourself up for a mastermind group or signing yourself up for some other sort of training, depending on where you are and what you do, that might be like the opportunity for you to come to that realization, because you just don't have the pieces in place to notice that day to day. Would you agree?
Yeah, when you look back to the origin of the mastermind group, it was people like Thomas Edison and John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie, the wealthiest people on the planet, who would get together. They would just discuss different problems. Somebody would bring something up and they just shoot holes in it. And they would, talk through and bounce back. Can you imagine the brain power in the room, working on those problems, and how valuable that time was? And that's something that we had the privilege of introducing to people through, next level opportunities that we offer. That is so exciting when the side conversations get going and people start to feed off each other and get multiple people working towards a common result.
Yep. And I'm going to use this opportunity as a shameless plug. It, Now I'm gonna caveat that this program is invitation only. So so it's for those folks who have been through one of our programs before. But that is one of the things that I love about our Leader Summit is how much of that happens, and how much those folks have really come to lean on each other and go to each other for feedback and input, and I love how that's come out of our team to kind of have that purpose as kind of a founding principle of, this is not just about growing individual leaders within organizations. This is about creating networks of the next generation of organizational leaders, and giving them people they can lean on and grow from and learn from. It's incredibly powerful because leadership can be so isolating sometimes.
Yeah, and just a couple pieces of feedback from that group. So these are people who were already successful in their own right. They had climbed to the top of their organizations. But one of them said, after working with us for a couple of months, he's like, it's like I found 26 hours in my day. And everybody thinks, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time. Well, what would it mean to all of a sudden get clarity and certainty around what is your priority, and attacking your day that way? Another piece of feedback that I heard was, I didn't even realize that I was stuck. And to use an MJST saying, I didn't realize that I was surviving. But now I've got so much more energy, and it's impacting every area of my life, my team, our business, my family, overall, just my influence. And that's just a couple of individuals. But you think of the impact of that and the ripple effect. That's what gives me goosebumps.
Yeah. And Wade, you've also had the opportunity to work with leadership teams, right? Not just a CEO here or a vice president there, but actual senior leadership teams as a larger group. I'm curious, what's the feedback been from folks who again, it wasn't just one leader that went first. It was the whole crew.
Yeah, and once again, something doesn't have to be broken to go to work on it. Think of it in terms of refining, and refinement at that top level has a huge impact. But a couple pieces of feedback that I've heard is, number one, I wish we would have done this 2 years ago. Second one is, we came in as individuals, we're leaving as a team with a common purpose. And then finally, and this is one that's near and dear to my heart, but it's a senior leader that said, I realize now that most of our conversations before MJST were mostly superficial.
Mm.
That's a profound statement right there.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you as a leader and or a leadership team can't have real, authentic conversations about what's really going on, just think of how that's holding back your organization from what they're truly capable of. And so, yeah, I agree. That's incredibly, incredibly powerful, incredibly profound to have that moment or that piece of awareness about how the leadership team is interacting. Yeah, because the rest of your employee base is purely a mirror of leadership. I think that was actually an Instagram post based on some comments from Mark recently, right? What you see in your organization is often a mirror for what you're putting out as a leader, whether it's consciously or unconsciously. And so making sure that you know that again, it goes back to modeling. Like, folks, I'm not really sure when this podcast episode is going to drop, but I also have an episode coming out with a couple of friends of mine, Jessica Parrish and Alex Schnabelrock, who also talked about the power of modeling as a leader. And so I think it's probably, if you've been listening to this podcast here for a few weeks, if there's one thing you take away, it's that behaviors modeled by leadership matter, whether you do it intentionally or not.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when the leadership team can be vulnerable and trust each other and challenge each other, call people out, hold each other accountable, I believe, Amanda, how much I've read over the years, how many books I've read.
A lot.
A reader, excuse me. And I believe my number one book of all time in terms of business book is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It just is so powerful. It's so easy. It connects with everyone. I've heard a number of times where people say, man, you could just replace that company name with my company name, because that is exactly the conversation that we're having right now. And it's small stuff, but man, when you get those small things right, it has such a huge impact.
Absolutely. And I think that reiterates, obviously we'd love to have leaders come work with us. We love working with company leaders. We love how much, to your earlier phrase, of a ripple effect that can happen when leaders invest in themselves. Obviously in our business, we are out to make an impact on as many people as we can for the better. And the reality is that we need leaders on board in that mission to have that great amount of impact. And so, I'll say that obviously we're a little biased that we would love to work with organizational leaders through our programs. But I think it even goes beyond that. When we talk, this phrase, leaders go first, whatever the behavior is, whatever the mindset is that you want to see in your team, start there, right? If you want people to grow themselves, start reading, start listening to podcasts, and then talking to the people that you work with about what you're learning, what you're thinking about, right? Demonstrate that challenging old mindsets and coming up where challenging your beliefs that might no longer be serving you, demonstrating that that's important. Other people might start to do that as well. Send yourself to a workshop, go to a retreat, get involved in coaching, sign up for a training for your team. I think, it can look a lot of different ways depending on where you are and where you want to go. But But I think the really critical part is taking the first step
Yeah, it starts with me.
every time.
It starts with me. Own that. And, it reminds me, Amanda, I had a conversation with somebody that hasn't worked with us yet. And I was just asked to, give some coaching advice for, I'd say, a 35-year-old grain manager who has 4 grain originators working for him. And he called me up and just said, "Hey, I really need help. My 4 people need help." Well, after a half hour of questions and just digging and probing, he finally came to the realization that it starts with him.
Mm-hmm.
And he needed to start by investing in his relationships with his employees. And when you start to do that, then all of a sudden things start to shift.
Yeah. And as you were saying that, the thing that comes to mind of why that's so important is, I'm all for long-term relationships with our clients, for long-term coaching or whatever that is. But for most people we work with, or for most people who go through any professional development, I would say that relationship is somewhat by nature short-term. Right? Like for us, we have a longer relationship with our clients than most trainers do, right? We go beyond just a day or two workshop, and we work with folks for 90 days, in some programs 6 months, in some programs a year. But on the whole, there is a time stamp for a lot of those coaching relationships. You as the leader, you get to continue that growth even when the coach steps out. And so it goes back to what we very first said at the beginning, right? If you don't invest in yourself, so I'm just thinking about that story you just told, Wade, about the grain manager. He can send his 4 people to us, and that's great. But if he can't pick up the baton and run the next leg of the relay, how far have we actually gone? And so I think that's the thing to think about is your coach or your facilitator, we're not here to run the race for you. We're here to help you learn how to run the race and coach your team for the long haul. And yeah.
Yeah, that's a great call out there, Amanda, because thinking back, he probably thought that he was getting ready to have a conversation about signing his 4 people up for training.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point exactly, if you go back to the culture and the leader hasn't changed, it's not going to last. It can make a difference, but it's not going to serve you long term.
Yeah.
And so all of this is simply advice as to how to get the greatest return on your investment. And it's not, as we're hopefully laying out here, this isn't self-serving. This is about helping you come up with the greatest impact for your organization and for your customers.
Yeah. Now that being said, we'll work with whoever you want to send to us. But so if that guy eventually wants to send his 4 people, we'll sign him up. But yeah, we always have a bigger impact when we start with leaders, hands down, every single time. Because
when we don't, their people are saying, when can our leader go? When will our leader go? When will our CEO go? Because they see the things that don't align, mm-hmm. and they want them to align. They want it to be better. They know it can be better, but it starts with the leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I ask you, Wade, kind of one of my summary questions, I do want to take this opportunity. If Wade and I have caught your interest at all in this topic, or if you're a leader who is interested in what training and coaching might be able to do to help you level up as a leader, we do have our foundational program, The Thriving Leader, in May of 2019. And then we have another session starting in July of 2019, which are just great opportunities to kind of put your foot in the water, see what it can do for you, and see how it can sort of be that first pebble in the pond of expanding the capacity of your entire team.
And as the leader, when you go first, now you know how to apply it.
Mm-hmm.
Make a lot more sense. You're going to see what it can do for you, and then as you're going to start to connect the dots in terms of what makes sense organizationally.
Absolutely. So with that, Wade, what do you got going on in life right now that's super energizing?
Yeah, and I think the thing that has me fired up the absolute most right now, without a doubt, it is helping organizations through organizational change.
Mm.
So, companies that are coming together, merging, acquiring, whatever that situation might be, but starting with them. So rather than let's get a couple years down the road and then figure this thing out, then we invest in people, let's invest in people up front and get that right. And when we do, I think the impact of that will just be unbelievable.
Awesome. I'm really excited to see where some of those initiatives go for you, because I think that is the quintessential demonstration of how important it is for leaders to go first. If ever there was uncertainty in the corporate space, it's during a merger, an acquisition, a big leadership changeover, anything that just rocks an organization from top to bottom. Leadership becomes just incredibly critical. And so I'm really excited to hear how some of those things go for you. So Wade, before we wrap up our time today, any final thoughts to share with folks listening?
Yeah, it starts with us leading by example. So leaders go first. I think we hit that point home, but that's really what true leadership is: modeling the right behaviors, being authentic, 24/7. It's not something that you are from 7 a.m. till 6 o'clock at night, Monday through Friday. No, this is just simply who you are. And when people see that, people love that. People respect that. They may not agree with you 100% of the time, but those are the leaders that people want to follow. And I know we've said this before, but leaders and organizations are like magnets. They're either attracting or repelling talent. And so look to see, what evidence do you have? Are you leading the right way that's attracting the right people to your organization? And if not, it's time for some self-reflection and doing some soul searching to figure out, what does that need to be?
Excellent. Wade, thanks for coming on the show today. I always enjoy hearing some of your insight, especially as we talk about things related to leadership and organizational culture as a whole. So again, thanks for joining.
Absolutely, Amanda. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. If you like what you heard, make sure to jump over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. We appreciate the feedback, and it helps other people find the show. On that same note, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with a friend. As always, if you're looking for more resources to go from surviving to thriving, check out our website at www.markjeweltraining.com. That's Jewel with 2 L's. And you can find us under Mark Jewel Speaking and Training on all the major social networks. Remember, survival is dead. It's your time to thrive today. See you next week.